Welcome to the Audiobook World Championship, Episode 2. From London, John York. From San Diego, Antony Shugaar. And from Monaco, Kenneth Eade.
Hello and welcome to the Audiobook Club, the place to be in order to keep updated with everything that's going on at our academy. Up-to-date reports on the ranking lists, the latest in audiobook news, and of course, interviews and conversation with very special guests. The Audiobook World Awards Academy envisions a world where the primary tools to globally promote culture and education are none other than audiobooks. Here at our academy, along with our brilliant partners, we champion and celebrate authors, audiobook studios, and the teams behind their creations. I'm John York, and co-hosting with me today is the acclaimed writer, translator, and our juror, Antony Shugaar.
Hey Johnny, it's really nice to be here. I'm glad to have another chance to talk.
We also have another treat in store for you in this month's episode, as we're joined with none other than thriller author, political activist, and attorney Kenneth G. Eade. We can now proudly announce that Kenneth will be joining Antony, among others, as an Our Academy juror. Kenneth, it is such a pleasure to have you on the show. How excited are you to be joining the Academy as an official juror?
Thanks, Johnny. I like to be on the show too, and I'm really looking forward to serving as a juror on the program. It's going to be a big job, but it sounds like it's going to be a lot of fun too.
Absolutely. Now, before Antony and I get started picking Kenneth's brain, let's take a look at those all-important rankings. We've split the best received and highest ranked audiobooks from 3 varieties of distribution. The Big Five, small press, and independent, of both fiction and non-fiction releases, and broken them down into their genres. Each book represented has their official rating score, which we then use to determine a winner. The higher the score, the closer the audiobook is to the top. But remember, as the months go by, every review, every reaction, however the book is received from either a critic or the general public, will change that score. So it's vital to keep coming back and checking on the placements in each category, as they will be ever changing. I think with having our very own thriller writer on the show, it would be appropriate to take a look at the crime, mystery, and thriller category. Antony, Kenneth, taking a look at the ranking list, are there any titles in this category that stick out to you?
Well, I'm a bit of a historian, an amateur historian, and like it or not, I'm kind of a creature of the publishing industry. I'm fascinated to see a bunch of old names. Everything old is new again, as I think I like to say. Ken Follett, Eye of the Needle, here it is, number 3 on the Big Five. That is a very old title that's coming back, as things seem to do in this medium that favors everything new and yet seems to be fascinated by things that go back a long time. The other thing that I find interesting is that Don Bentley has taken over the Tom Clancy franchise with Tom Clancy's 0 Hour, and that's number 4, and Rising. Both of those look really interesting to me. How about you, Ken?
Well, whenever I'm researching for a book, it's an old Stephen King trick, but all authors do it. We read a lot, and we read a lot in our own genre. So when I saw David Baldacci and Michael Connolly there, these are 2 authors whom I read to do my research, to see what's happening with them. And I was thrilled to see that they made the list. So I looked at David Baldacci's Dreamtown, which also takes place in 1953 LA, my hometown. And Michael Connolly, I mean, who wouldn't love Mickey Haller, the Lincoln Lawyer, and Harry Bosch? And of course, this is Renee Ballard story called The Dark Hour. It's another series book that Michael's written. And I just love Connolly. He is the only non-lawyer I've ever met and I've ever seen in an author who can really write a courtroom scene. And I was really excited to sample both of those 2 books.
There's some really great picks, really great picks. We're going to be picking your brain as well from a writer's perspective in just a few moments. I think both of you, Antony, as well, I couldn't agree more. We have a new entry coming from Small Press, The Willow Marsh Murder by Karen Charlton, currently sitting in 4th place with a brilliant 46.97. The book is set in 1813 in Cambridgeshire. The story follows Detective Stephen Lavender and Constable Ned Woods as they are lured to an isolated estate in a deadly marshland in order to investigate a murder. The book is making a big splash with audiobook fans and is a title I'm thoroughly looking forward to checking out. To get access to the official ranking list, you can do so by visiting our website, Awaa.academy. We would also like to encourage you to sign up as a member. By doing so, you'll be able to cast your votes for your favorite audiobook titles, as well as many other membership benefits. It's completely free and very simple to join up. For more information on becoming a member, once again, head over to Awaa.academy.
So Ken, I think there's a very special feeling about thrillers and noir and detective fiction in general and Southern California. And I too am a native Californian, so I call out to you. So one of the questions I have about this genre is, from the very universal to the intensely specific, what are the things that make a really good thriller? As you, as the author of many very good thrillers, can tell us.
Oh, thanks for the compliment. I think the main thing that makes a good thriller is the main thing that makes any good fiction book, and that's the story. If you don't have a good story that is going to hook the reader or the listener, in our case here, it's not going to make it. The other thing you need is a lot of action. There needs to be a lot happening. And there has to be a mystery. There has to be something that throughout the entire book and throughout each chapter of the book and perhaps each act of the 3 acts of the book, there has to be a mystery that's going to be solved, or it's going to be partially solved, because we're coming in as a reader or a listener as detectives ourselves. We're placing ourselves in this world of the author. And we want to help the author figure out what's going on, what's happening in this book. So I think those elements are what makes a really good book.
So then there's another step here, which is, what is it? First off, I'm sure that an author has to develop a relationship of trust and almost working together with the reader. How does the author feel about the voice that's going to produce the audiobook? What do you expect of your narrator? What do you hope from your narrator? And what have you seen?
Well, that's having produced some of my own audiobooks through ACX. What an author would really like is for a narrator who can, for an example, I listened to an audiobook, a classic, Crime and Punishment, and the narrator was none other than James Mason. And what a voice he has. He was the only actor in the entire book. He did all the voices, and I was just pinned to the speaker listening to him. This is what an author would love to have, someone like that to narrate the book.
You don't ask much, just be James Mason.
Just James Mason. And, with a couple of books that I sampled, the one I really, really enjoyed listening to the sample was the Michael Connolly book. It was only one actor also, but and it was a woman, and she just did a great job. So this is what you're looking for: someone who can bring your book to life. And
right.
If you get a robot, blah, 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 this is not going to bring your book to life.
I think that sounds very reasonable. And where do you see the audiobook industry going? How is it working for authors, and how is it growing?
I think it's grown bigger than authors now. So it's not a question of whether you want to get your book produced as an audiobook. It's a question of when. And the answer is now, because if you're not, then you are going to miss out a segment of the market that is becoming very big.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a friend of mine who's read every single book that I've ever written, and but he spends a lot of time in his car, and now he only listens to audiobooks. And I've got my latest book, which he wants to read. He keeps asking me, "When's it coming on audiobook? When's it coming on audiobook?" So I'm not even going to have my best reader until I produce the audiobook.
And so, I mean, I'm going to say as a joke, are you worried about surprise, jolts for the reader in case they're driving in heavy traffic? But more seriously, how does, to what extent does an author now have to take in this eventual iteration of the book? Does that shape the way you write at all when you're thinking of it going into audiobook?
Me personally, no, because all of my books, before I wrote novels, I wrote some screenplays.
Mm-hmm.
And my books are heavy on dialogue. They move along. And any one of my books could be adapted well for an audiobook or a movie. So for me, it was never a consideration. But for some people whose style doesn't involve a lot of dialogue, listening to an audiobook, like, for example, an audiobook on Franz Kafka, The Trial, which I really enjoyed reading, I think the audiobook would be kind of flat because there's not a lot of dialogue. There's just a lot of narration, so to speak.
Well, I think that as fellow Californians from different cities, but I think we can agree on Raymond Chandler, who's an LA resident and then who came down and lived in La Jolla, which he famously described as a city where very elderly people live with their parents. It's changed. But just going back, because Raymond Chandler was all about the patter, the talk. It was the dialogue was the thing for him. What elements can an audiobook bring that enhances the experience of a thriller? So, I mean, there's dialogue, but what other things can there be in there? Is this changing? Is it developing?
Well, yes, changing and developing. Now they're basically adding actors for each character, and there's castings just like movie castings, and they're adding sound effects. I mean, one of my I have a political thriller series about an assassin for hire. I don't think sound effects would be very good for people driving in your car, as you mentioned before, because when the bullets start flying, there's quite a lot of them. But those kind of things, they're becoming more sophisticated and adding those elements.
Are you So I'd love to know. Are you excited about the future of this medium? Do you see it as a kind of an expansion of what we can do with storytelling?
Well, my daughter is 3 years old and she doesn't read. So we tell her stories every night. We don't let her watch TV. So she just can't wait until that time when we open a book, and sometimes she'll just bring us one. So I think it's really how storytelling started with audio. People were telling each other stories before they were writing them down, before they were publishing, before we even had the Gutenberg press. So I think we've already experienced this, and it hits that primitive chord in us that really enjoys listening to a good story.
Yeah, and I'll just throw in as a lapsed classicist, we call it audio. That word is 2,000 years old. It's Latin. It's been around forever.
Yeah. It's one of the, I think we were touching it in the first episode, Tony, where we're talking about the old is new again, and this sort of, this new technology, quote unquote, of talking books isn't as new as we once think. And also, it's not just audiobooks that are sort of gathering this medium. I mean, you get an article on the New Yorker app and it can be read to you. There's companies out there who read out the articles so you can have them on the go. It's this there's this level of making everything super convenient. You know, it's great for commuting, it's great for that. And also some of the denser articles that someone with, you know, my head, for example, may struggle to understand. That adds that element of being able to listen to it and adds that element to it.
Yeah, I remember Thomas Friedman wrote something about the professions of the future, and one of them that he just categorized as explainers. And the right voice, just telling it in the right way, can take the reader on the journey. And as you said, no robots need apply.
Yeah, telling it the wrong way is definitely not going to keep the listener's attention.
I guess it's you produced your own audiobook, Ken. Did you say it was in 2015?
I think the last one was 2015. Yeah.
2015, yeah. So what was that experience like? Was that the first? How many audiobooks have you produced? Can you talk us through about what that experience was like?
Most of my books are audiobooks also. So I started, in the beginning. It was a great experience. I mean, choosing the right person was probably the hardest part. You audition people. So that was the hardest part. And then when you get the sampling back, you get chapters back and you listen to them, it's kind of a kick, because the story is in my head. I don't really get to hear it told by someone else. So it was kind of cool every time.
Yeah, I bet. Did it take you back to producing movies?
In a way it did. But I mean, there's nothing like producing a movie.
If watching The Offer and Al Ruddy, his story, I can't even imagine. It must be incredible. Did it give you a lot of grist for your stories? Yeah,
I mean, it definitely gives you some background. And like I said, since I wrote screenplays before books, I've pretty much mastered the dialogue, which moves the thriller along. So my books are really quick reads, even if they're most of them are 300-400 pages, but even if they were a little bit longer, still be a quick read because of the dialogue.
As for an audiobook narrator auditioning for your project, how important is it for them to have really distinguished and distinctive character voices? Is that something that you took into consideration when casting for your project?
Absolutely, because as I said before, or maybe I didn't say it, I was talking about story being the most important part of a thriller book, but the character. I mean, you were talking about people connecting with the author. They don't connect with the author. They connect with the character. So you really want someone representing your character, and you're going to actually hear this character's voice. And it's got to be, and it never matches the one that's in your head, but it's got to come close. So that's really important.
Yeah. I always find it really fascinating, the development of characters, because you hear that I've heard that a character has to be kind of honest to be relatable. Would you say there's any truth in that?
I think, and all my characters are real. In fact, one of the characters, Robert Garcia in the Paladine series, was developed by one of my readers of my legal thriller series. And he described this person to me who's basically a thoughtless killer. And when I was writing the character, creating the character, I couldn't interest people in a thoughtless killer. So I gave him a dog and a girlfriend, off and on girlfriend. And that did it. People love him. They think he's a hero, even though he's an anti-hero.
Well, thrillers are where we go to work out some of our, frustrations and longings, and it's an amazing stage. So that must be just incredible. And I will say, I mentioned Al Ruddy. I noticed a detail about The Godfather that I hadn't. So this is totally left field. But the emblem of it and what they used on the poster is a marionette. It's a puppet on strings, and that is The Godfather. But that's also the author, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the author is in fact, in the movie industry, we call actors meat puppets. So the author is definitely the puppeteer, and you take these people from life. Da Vinci used to go into the streets of Milan to look for faces to put in his paintings, and a lot of the faces in Last Supper were local people from Milan. And we do the same thing as authors. We take characters of people we know, or maybe people we think we know, and sometimes we make a composite character of 2, 3, or 4 different people. So this is, when an author is designing a character, we take these elements from life, and because they have to be real. My stories have to be real, and my characters have to be real, or I'm not going to publish them.
The question arises, is there ever a through line from the voice of the character of the real person who inspired the character to the voice that you want to hear from the narrator of the audiobook? And I'm not saying necessarily in your experience, but does that seem like something that you would care about having? Could it be a factor?
Oh, that's definitely a factor. But you get to a point where with anything in casting actors, you've just got to pick your best choice. You have your wish list of actors you wish you could have, and you have the available ones, and you have to compromise. Same as casting a movie.
I would love to be one of the people in the streets of Milan in the 1500s. Was the only one who was out that morning.
Yeah.
And Leonardo picked me, not because I was particularly good, but because he really needed someone that day.
Yeah.
Which is how I feel about life in general. So I'm good with it.
Yeah.
So Ken, are there any audiobooks that you've listened to lately that you would think would be really appropriate for children, young people, that you could recommend?
Well, not the ones that I've listened to, but I wish there were an audiobook for Winnie and Wilbur, Winnie the Witch, because that is my 3-year-old's favorite book right now. And it's a whole series. And I was looking on Amazon. I couldn't find an audiobook on it. So please make one.
Once again, make sure to keep heading over to the official Academy rankings to witness the action firsthand ahead of the big night next year. We're going to be bringing you updates every month on the show, as well as interviews with the most amazing guests sharing their shared love of this wonderful medium. For more information on what we do here at the Academy, head over to our website, awaa.academy, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, hitting that notification bell so you don't miss out on any future videos and episodes. Antony, Kenneth, thank you so much for joining us on this episode. Antony, how do you think it's gone?
I think it's gone great, Johnny. And Ken, I really want to thank you for a very interesting conversation. Very interesting to hear your take on the inside of this world.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun. I'm happy to be a part of it.
Join us next time when Antony and I are joined with the incredible Remo Girone. Thank you very much for tuning in and making us a part of your day.